Maybe that's what I should go do.
And welcome,
hey, you got to go
everyone.
live.
We are live.
All right.
Yeah, we are live. And tonight we're going to talk about good stuff.
Hidden stresses.
Yep. So let me ask y'all a question. What if I told you your birds might not be sick? They might not have worms. You might not even have a feed problem. But they're still losing their performance every day, you say. You have low hatch rates, thin shells, poor growth, rooster's not doing his job. Your birds just ain't thriving. And the problem, same problem we have, stress. Not the obvious kind, not the they're dying kind, the hidden ones, the quiet ones, the ones that most poultry keepers never even think about. Tonight, I've got Jeff, and between the two of us, we are going to break down what is secretly stressing your flock. From feed mistakes, light problems,
We're not going to get it all done in one episode.
Parasites. You handle your birds. Because if you don't control the stress will control you. Yep. How many times have you ever heard that one? My doctor told me that once. If you don't control your stress, the stress will control you.
Uh-huh. He was right too, wasn't he?
Yeah. But hey, I haven't had another heart attack since. So living the dream.
That's good.
So how have you been, Jeff? Speaking of stress and living the dream.
I've been busier than a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs, man. I tell you what. I guess that's good. Busy's supposed to be good, they tell me, right? So
they say that. And they say when people need you in the office, it's job security. But sometimes you just want to get away.
I'm ready to get away again. I've only been back for a week. I'm ready to go. So
I understand. What stress? What is stress in chickens?
Stress takes on a lot of different forms, right? So, whether it can be the amount of eggs laid, it can be, it can be behavioral, it can be lack of feed intake. I mean, the list is long and distinguished. So, you're going to hear me say this 6 times tonight, but you got to sit there and watch your chickens, right? Observation is key. And you have to know what normal is before you can identify abnormal, right? So, the more time you spend sitting there watching your chickens, the better off you're going to be. They'll tell you when there's a problem. You just have to watch for it. But everybody knows the obvious stress, right? When you hear a hen squealing from 100 yards away or something like that.
Yeah. That loud squawk that means there's something flying over.
Right. That's the easy stress to identify. The subtle stress is, and I've been trained to look for these things, but if I walk into a flock, like a general population type flock, I'm looking for the bird that isn't with the rest of the flock, right? Who's standing off by themselves. I'm looking for droopiness. I'm looking for kind of, lazy eyes that aren't really alert, clear and bright. So, I'm looking for alertness. And of course, I'm looking for anything that doesn't walk right. They seem like they're obvious defects, but if I walked in the flock and said, "Hey, why isn't that chicken over there walking right?" And the farmer says, "Oh, I never noticed that before." I can't tell you how many times I've gotten that response in my lifetime at doing this. Okay. I never noticed that before. Okay. So if you didn't notice, why do you have chickens? Okay. I mean, why are you taking on the responsibility to be a poultry manager? But it happens, right? So, but we don't always see those stress. But I had somebody call me the other day, and chicken quit laying, and they were worried about it, of course, and, because it had been. And I think when I told them to put the rubber gloves on, the blue or black nitrile gloves, and put a little Vaseline on that, and stick his finger up a chicken butt to see if there's an egg stuck, I think he was rethinking his position on being a chicken keeper. Then when I said, get the turkey baster out and make some homemade warm saline solution and flush it out. Oh yeah, I'm sure he's rethinking whether he wants to be a chicken manager or not. So
that's crazy.
You touched on lights, and Sue asked a question. She thinks she might have a light problem in the new coop.
Yeah, I was fixing to pop that up.
Yeah, go ahead.
It says, I'm thinking I'm having a light problem in my new coop. Ambient light from my backyard light reaches it. 3 of the 6 hens in that coop have begun to eat eggs. This weekend, they get a rollaway box. Yeah, that would be a good thing so they can't eat them.
So if you haven't done it already, download the free app to your phone and LUX, and go out there while the backyard nightlight is on.
Yeah.
And measure how much light is in the coop area, with the chickens, just to see where you're at. 40 is what you want, but if they're trying to sleep, you got to be below 20. And then depending on what the color of that light is going to make a big difference as well. But so, yeah, especially if it's like one of those amber kind of mercury or mercury type vapor.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Depends on that orangish color, that amber orangish color is going to stimulate them, even though it may be really low. So
Sue, do this. When you walk out in your backyard, send me a picture of how the light looks as it's casting onto that pen, and then go look and see what the level reads, and let me know. We will figure that out.
Yeah, it could just be the color. It may not even be the intensity. It could just be a color issue.
It could be that.
Yeah, because the old
I had one that I had to get one of those like fabric shade cloth things off of Amazon and hang it along the wall, because the motion light that was on the side of my house almost shined directly into the door of the coop. So I was like, that might be why I'm not getting anything out of these ladies. Put that up over the door, and probably within a week, I would say, we're back in business.
I have family members, and I'm not going to name any names, right? But I have family members that when you said, like the chickens, she would put the light on for 24 hours, right? She'd just go turn the light on, leave it on. It was on all the time. So
that'd be really good for like 2 days.
No, not even.
Then
if the light
they're going to be so stressed out. they're gonna
Yep.
go on strike. You'd be lucky if you get any eggs that second day. But that's oh yeah, she said it. She said it was bright white, so that's probably gonna need one of those $15-$20 shade cloths that'll dangle over that side of the coop to knock that down, and you'd be all right. The fabric ones, the good thing about those is they don't make a lot of noise when the wind blows them, but they will move with the wind, so they don't tear as easy. Because a lot of times when people use tarps around their coops in the wintertime to keep the wind out, and they don't stick them up solid, and they make a lot of racket with the wind, and that'll stress your birds out too. What kind of, since you brought that up, what other environmental stressors do you commonly have people ask you about?
I don't. That's the problem. Is I don't have people asking me about those. I have to fish for them. So when somebody contacts me, my chickens are doing this. Okay, and right then I
They
got to
wait
do
till
my
the
normal.
they
Right, I
wait till the
gotta do my
crap hits
20
the
foot.
fan, and then you got to put on
Yeah,
your Sherlock Holmes
yeah,
outfit
yeah.
and
I got to play
start
20
investigating.
questions to. Yep, exactly. So,
Yeah.
um, but so you know, it ranges from everything. I'll tell you one of the big ones that I see, and nobody wants to really talk about it, is introducing new birds to the flock. Right, the idea that they think that your flock wants new members is not so. They have a pecking order. It's already been established, and they're not. They, when you put a new bird in, it starts over again. Right.
I tell
So
them that chickens are like a grumpy old man. They don't want new friends. You're
they
trying
really
to
don't like.
defy it when
They
you
really
when you
don't
give
like
them new
change.
ones. Mm-mm,
Yeah, right? They are not big on change.
mm-mm.
Some new yard area, they're all happy with that, but that's about one of the few changes that they do like.
Yeah, if they don't have a lot of green grass and you give them some green grass, they'll be all about that. So what I did recently is to introduce some birds is I had some that were, you know, my layers that hatched out last year and some breeding flock that was a little older in a large aluminum coop. I had 2 year ago birds and this year birds or last year birds. And, they got along with each other. That pecking order got established and all that good stuff. Um, what I did with the new ones when I put them outside, I think I even posted a picture of that small coop with a light inside of it because it was in the 20s and 30s and they weren't even 8 weeks old. But I put that coop right at the front of the other one to where they saw each other all the time. They knew they existed, but they wasn't in each other's living room. And then when the youngest pullet started laying eggs in the small coop one night when it was really dark, I went out there with my green headlamp and I literally just tossed them in. No problems. But they had been in each other's proximity for over a month at this point, closer to 2. So,
Yeah, you can do that where you put a cage or a pen, side by side, and they can
mhm.
kind of start their socializing, restructuring,
Yeah,
through the fence without getting killed.
right.
Um, yeah, but I brought some really nice Buff Orpingtons home for my neighbor next door, right? He's got kids, wanted to do the chicken thing. Really nice Buff Orpingtons, right? And
Mhm.
he had some Tractor Supply hens in there already. He put them in there, and he did the socializing thing for about a week. And then
Okay.
he opened that dog crate up that he had the Buff Orpingtons in, and they still stayed in there, even though they were the biggest birds in the coop. Okay,
Right.
they still didn't want to come out. They had reestablished now a new flock of themselves, three of them, you know, in that dog kennel,
And they
and
were
they did.
comfortable.
It took a long time for them to kind of blend in, but
And that is a thing. It happens. There's been times that I've had them, and I've kind of been like, "Look, I got stuff I got to do. Y'all need to get out." Um,
it don't work that way.
we deal more with cold stress. Definitely a Canadian.
Yeah,
Rarely
this.
pushes 70 to 77 Fahrenheit there in the summer, which would be perfect.
Mhm.
But the negative 30 to 40 plus with wind chills at night, that definitely would be rough on a chicken. So what are some ways to cope with that?
They've got great built-in insulation, right? So the key factor for winter stress or cold temperatures is no direct wind on them, right?
Yeah.
You got to make sure that they're not getting hit with, so they got a wind block. The biggest factor that I learned when I had a observation group in the backyard was keep their bedding extremely deep. Okay, so the more insulation I could give them for their feet, the happier they were. Okay, then that seemed to be like the biggest factor is keeping their feet warm and dry. So bedding was a big deal. So
Yeah. For me, um, what I do in the summertime with my coops is I move them around, obviously, because I like for them to have fresh ground. But in the wintertime, I'll move them to where on mine I have the Aluma coops, and on the 10 by 12s, the back 4 or 5 feet, I believe it is. There's a flat that goes all the way down where the roost bars are. So, and I leave that down, obviously, to knock the wind off of them at night or whenever they're on the roost. And I will leave that in that same spot all winter. I will let them enjoy all the grass. And once it's gone, I'll go in there one night while they're on the roost poles, and I will put a bunch of lime down, a bunch of stall pellets down, and 2 bundles of pine shavings. And I'll get it to where it's probably 3, 4 inches thick. That way, even when it does come a hard rain through there, it doesn't cause a problem for them. And then it's a pain in the butt to move it afterwards. But, I get eggs all winter in there.
well, as long as the birds are happy, right, and that happy and comfortable, that's what you're really ideally looking for. So, what were those other topics that you had hit on? Um,
Um, let's see.
And
We talked about the
Jason made a
litter.
good point that even taking birds out, so once you have a flock structure, okay,
Yeah,
removing
that
more
one.
than one or two at a time, and in removing the wrong one, like taking the boss hen out of there, whoever the bossiest hens are, the rest of them really don't know how to act, right? Because they're trying
Yeah,
to
because
figure
she
out
tells them what to
who,
do.
yeah, who's number one. So
Yeah.
you got to be careful about who you're taking out and putting in.
You know, I've had some people that would come and look at different groups, and they'd be like, "Well, I want that one, and I want that one." No, I told you these birds would go as a set, or they won't go nowhere. So if you're taking, you're going to take this group, or you're not taking anything, because I didn't want, you know, I didn't want to pull
People don't.
Susie Q's best friend, and nobody's going to know how to act, and it's going to cause problems. And I don't like that. Also, another thing that somebody I know did, and I didn't find this out until they're like, dude, this guy has commercial layers as a flock and a couple of Rhode Island red roosters with him. And he was like, I was getting almost an egg a day out of all of them, and they just quit. I said, well, what's changed? He said, nothing. Literally nothing has changed. I said, well, what happened? He's like, what do you mean what happened? And he said, something happened. And he said, well, we talked for a while, and I finally got it out of him that his LGD injured one of the birds, and he broke out a machete in the run with the rest of the birds. I was like, dude, you Harry carried their best friend. Like, it's going to take some time to get over that.
Yep.
They're just chickens. They're just peanut brain sized chickens. I get that. And they do a lot of stupid stuff, but they're a lot smarter than most people give them credit for. So, another topic that we had that's huge, lots of people talk about, you know, especially in the PBN group, is nutritional stress. You know,
if we're not hitting their nutritional needs, they're going to let you know, right? So, look, I can't get people to weigh eggs. I can't get people to, and they don't understand. Like, those amino acids and those proteins that we talked about are going to directly drive your egg size, right? So, what is
yeah,
the appropriate egg size for your bird? Okay. And even if you get one of those cheap old fashioned set of scales that you set the egg on, periodically just recalibrate your eye. Okay. Just
those ain't
recalibrate.
cheap.
Well, all right.
The one that, you know, you set it on it and it tells you if it's a small, medium, large,
Yeah.
whatever. I actually looked for one of them on the interweb. It was $45 dang dollars. And
Yeah.
I was like,
Was it a
I can, for like $10, I can get a Amazon branded scales that weigh grams and tell me
well,
what my
then do
bird.
that. But
But I was really
checking.
shocked at how much those were.
Yeah.
But they do
They're
look
now
cool.
they're more collector's items slash antiques, those sorts of things, right? Because they look good sitting on a shelf somewhere.
Yeah, they
Not that
do. They do
anybody
look
uses them.
nice.
Yeah, they're colorful, right? Because you got all the different colors from the different egg sizes. But
Yeah.
look, and not in PBN or not in Poultry Keepers 360, but in some of the other poultry groups, I see people holding this egg, the size of my hand that came from a chicken, and they're like, "Look, I got triple yoker came out of my hand. It's as big as a goose egg," and they don't realize the stress that they're putting that chicken through to do that. Right? Even double yokers are not a good thing. Okay, that means that we're overfeeding. We're overfeeding
Say
protein.
is the number one
Okay.
cause of that you or me or anybody else as a chicken tender can do to cause that.
To make double, you mean how do we make like a double yoker or a triple yoker?
Like, what are we doing to cause that?
Well,
I know that
yeah.
there's a certain level of it that's genetic. I get that.
No, 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 it's not. Okay, just throw that right out. Okay, that is hogwash, as my grandmother used to say. Okay, we're overfeeding.
It should be
You're
egg
eating
wash.
too many grams of protein. Right. So then I mean, if you need stewing hands that have a lot of fat on them because you want to make bone broth, keep doing what you're doing. If you want longevity and healthy hands, we got to keep we got to keep the calorie count in line, right? And people just
Mm-hmm.
can't grasp that concept. Okay,
No,
I can't keep my calorie count in line, and I can tell you that I'm not in great shape. So those of you who've seen me, I'm carrying
there's a
a few
cause,
extra pounds. Yeah, there is a cause. Okay.
and oddly, a lot of people are like, it's just a chicken, but there's a lot of stuff that affects us the same way it does chickens. Like too
I,
many calories.
too many calories is too many calories. It doesn't matter the species or the animal. Too many calories is too many calories. So
John
what's
says,
John
"Hey
got?
guys, little hollow combine here from North Carolina. What's the thought on egg size making smaller pullets over actual inbreeding?"
I'm not sure what
So
what's he asking.
inbreeding is also known as to breeders as line breeding. And
Yeah.
once you achieve what you want to achieve with your birds, line breeding is the only way to maintain it. That has nothing to do with a smaller bird. Now, hatching out a pullet egg versus a mature egg, that does. And you can't get that back. If let's say, here's an example, my American breast. If I hatch from them something in the 57 to 65 ish gram area, I'm going to have a bird that weighs 7 pounds ish in 14, 15 weeks. All right. If I hatch a pullet egg, one that's closer to 50 grams, it may be a year and a half before that bird sees that size. Like, that's how long it takes to catch up. That's why a lot of breeders tell you to eat the pullet eggs, fight the temptation, don't don't hatch them. I do have some in right now. The only reason I put those eggs in the incubator is because stupid. I took the I put the two flock or put the younger breasts in with the older breasts after the selection and culling was done the final time, and I did not test hatch beforehand. But when I got the eggs out of the nest box, it was very obvious who my mature birds were and who my pullets were. So I want to see the fertility on the pullets. Now those chicks, after I take them out, weigh them, I'll probably keep them alive for a week or two. Then I will put them in with some CO2, and then I will put them in the deep freeze and send them to a friend of mine that raises reptiles. So that's the only something situation like that is the only reason you should ever hatch a pullet egg. It will give you a smaller bird. See, Jeff helped me out last year. I bet you hear that pretty often. I was overfeeding my birds by an ounce and a half a day. My 55-gram eggs creeped to the 63 to 64, It ended up being a Canadian metric to imperial mistake. I reduced more in the summer. I mean, that makes sense.
Right. He goes down. So if we go back to, and John came in with, I was talking about how feed affecting egg size. So
Hmm.
protein, John, the amount of protein will affect the egg size. And even what Kerry was talking about with his pullets. And so if we let pullets stimulate into laying before the ovaries are fully formed and her body is fully formed, okay, you're going to get smaller eggs or pullet sized eggs. And as Gary said, you don't want to hatch pullet sized eggs because you're going to end up with deficient chicks. They're either going to hatch weak, they're going to be smaller, they're going to get off to a slower start. You don't really want you don't really necessarily want to keep those chicks if they're planning to be future, breeding stock or show birds, because they're going to be underdeveloped for a
Not
long
gonna
time.
happen.
They'll eventually catch up, but it takes a lot longer than it should.
Hmm.
And this is where knowing your egg size, like Jason was talking about, knowing your egg size for your breed and staying in that egg size, you can go plus or minus 5 grams at the most. Okay. So, like, Jason has a 55 gram, his bird should lay 55-gram eggs. So, as long as I don't really want to go down to 50, but let's say 52 to 58, even 60s if you're short on eggs. But even the jumbo eggs don't hatch right. Okay, those chicks will not necessarily perform as well as they should. Okay,
Yeah, you
so
can't. You can hatch too big of one.
yeah, they'll hatch, but again, the chick is not going to function as well as that ideal egg size. Okay. Um, yeah, sorry, we really digressed. We were talking about stresses and we got off on egg size, but yeah.
Yeah, but I mean that's when the protein is too high, aka feeding a
Hmm.
good layer feed, that you're mixing what you should. When you use the breeder supplement to get it where it needs to be, and then you decide, oh well, let me throw in some black soldier fly larvae and you know all the other stuff that people do that's pretty high in protein and you know protein and fat and about nothing else, and it screws with the birds. It'll do that,
It
which
does.
is a nutritional stress, which is where we were. Let's see. What about microtoxins in the feed?
Um, okay, so mycotoxins just slowly depress the immune system.
Right.
So if they're challenged, I mean, if they're really bad, you can see weight loss, you can see a lack of thriftiness, you can see dulling of the feathers, dulling of the eyes, things like that. Just depends on what the level is. But mycotoxins are really going to suppress the immune system or keep it from functioning at a high level.
Right.
So if a disease of some type were to move through your area, it would hit you a lot harder. Okay? And any more
Because their immune
mycotoxins,
system would be a little weaker, right?
right? It's already being challenged, or it's just it's not, like I said, functioning at a high level, and so yeah, you're just going to get hit a whole lot harder. So instead of them being able to fight it off and push through it, you're gonna see those signs of illness, whether it's
A little suffering.
sneezing, snitting, yeah. Um,
Um, here, this one came out, and I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be Jeff's favorite one." What about people that mix their own feed and use a whole bunch of different stuff and a whole bunch of different supplements?
well, they don't know what they have, right? you see it all the time, and it's not just with chickens. I see it with all kinds of animals, right?
Yep.
They heard somebody at the show, or they heard somebody down the road, or they heard somebody, on a podcast or whatever, right? And oh, I started adding this, and it made a huge difference, right? And
Yeah.
so they just add one more thing on, and they don't really know what they have. They don't know what the balance is. Chances are it's out of balance, and there's just no way to what.
But Jeff, it's pretty. The feed's pretty,
Yeah,
man.
it's pretty.
I
Yeah,
saw that
it's pretty
comment and I
cool.
was like, oh, that'll get him too. Because people
Uh,
always say, look how pretty this feed is. And I saw a lady today, she popped up on my reels, I think it is, like 3 or 4 different times throughout the day. It's this lady that has a homestead and she's like, she made this video that talks about how to save money on chicken feed. And I was like, oh dear God. But the curiosity in me had to watch it to see what she said. And, she throws in the black soldier flies and sunflower seeds and black oil sunflower seeds and corn, wheat, oats, regular feed, scratch feed, and then puts kicking chicken in it.
she was proud of that feed, wasn't she?
Very proud. Like she was talking about it like she discovered sliced bread. And I'm like, don't. But I found myself typing on a comment that said, but what's the nutritional value? And I hit enter before I could stop it.
You did that on purpose.
John, the mealworms, like, and that may be a great mix the way the lady does it, but she has no clue because she didn't get a nutritionist to put it together for her, and she didn't measure out jack. I mean, she was tossing stuff in with a scoop, and I'm like, Jeff and I have had this conversation before. He can make a suitable ration out of dirt, poop, and some vitamins and minerals. Like you can make a ration out of that stuff that, looks pretty, but it's got to be calculated because, certain vitamins and minerals have to be in certain proportions. And if the proportion is off, it affects how their bodies use another one. So you screw them up. Yeah. Not meaning to hog the chat, but having the right bird for the right climate will reduce a lot of environmental stress. My rocks are struggling this year to the point he's thinking Chanticleers. Now that is a good idea because Chanticleers were actually developed in Canada for that type of weather. But you got some really good looking rocks and they do well.
If Jason can wait it out, his rocks will eventually climatize. A few generations from now, they'll be better.
They'll be
Right?
better.
They
Yeah.
will adapt. They're going to adapt to the environment, and he'll see them change. But yeah, I mean, he's right.
Now rocks have big combs and wattles, and that's probably what struggles the most. Would that be a situation where he might want to think about doing something with those to keep them from getting frostbit?
Well, it could, but it doesn't meet the standard, right? It's not like you can't really dub them and meet the standard. And he is breeding. He's breeding to the standard. He's trying to improve his breed to the standard. So,
Well, I knew he was trying to improve them to the standard because that's just the kind of guy that he is. But I didn't know if his primary concern was meat and eggs or if he was actually going to show them.
no,
Because
it's still meat and eggs, right?
yeah,
But he wants to improve them and take them to the standard. And so, yeah, it's a tough sell unless you create the environment that they can be okay and thrive. But if they're going to go outside at -30, it's going to be a problem. And you'd need some really deep bedding in those coops to even think about keeping those birds warm. Um,
hmm
you'd even think about some supplemental heat, at those temperatures, maybe. But, Kelly's on the other side of Canada, right? Still has the -30, -40 for long stretches and, doesn't have a frostbite issue. Yeah. So, but he beds pretty well with straw and
yeah.
keeps them up high and dry. But those are American game fowl, so you do dub the roosters, right, at a certain age. So
And a lot of them also, the hens have small combs and wattles like the Chanticleers.
yeah,
They don't really have one.
yeah. But I mean, Jason's point, select the breed that fits your environment and your climate. Don't, you know, don't try and fit a square peg in a round hole. It just don't work very well. I mean, you can do it if you get a big enough hammer, but it doesn't make it right. So,
But Jason, he is doing really good work with them. I've seen videos and I've seen pictures, and I think in time they can get acclimated.
yeah,
Not as good as the Chanticleers, but he's doing a lot of the right stuff with them. But it's
yeah.
definitely not an overnight thing. So unless
Well,
you want that challenge, get something for your area.
well, he likes a challenge, but I see
Yeah.
where he's going ice fishing and hunting and things like that. So yeah, he likes the challenge, but really in his climate, great dual purpose birds are going to be the Faverolles or the Chanticleers or that type of bird. Plus, they tend to lay in the winter. They're kind of opposite, like stimulated. So
He said his astrolorps have had a struggle this winter in Vermont. Yeah,
Vermont's
I
got
could
hit
see
pretty
that.
hard. They've had an unusual winter. But
Yeah, it's
again,
been rough this year.
the breed was developed in Australia, so it's
Yeah.
made for a warmer climate. Um, yeah, unfortunately, we fall in love with breeds that may not fit our situation. So we either have to, like I said, we have to adjust the environment so that they can be comfortable, or think about a different breed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. We talked about social and behavioral stresses with the pecking order and isolating new birds and all that good stuff. What about handling and management stress?
I was thinking about it before the show. Especially the people in the show circuit where they're moving birds, even though their
Mm-hmm.
birds are somewhat used to it, unless it's a new bird going to a show. Um, transporting, changing that environment, transporting, especially if you're going long hours,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be stressful on the bird, right? If you don't regularly handle your birds, then yeah, picking them up and handling them is going to be a stress thing because they don't know what you're doing, right?
Yep.
You're just a big predator. But
True.
so you need to be consistent in your management style. So if you're going to handle them, but
Right.
do it frequently. If you're not going to handle them, don't handle them. Right? Part
Yeah.
time handling once or twice a year isn't. They're not going to adapt to that. So
You're
you
not a
just
chicken
gotta
person.
no, no. If you can't cuddle a chicken and be happy, then you're not a chicken person. So
Um, Keith Rather from Rather Farms, they post some videos. Like he's got this one rooster. well, he ain't a rooster. He's I think it's probably like 8 or 10, 12 weeks old, something like that. But this bird goes in the house with him, sits in his lap, walks around on his shoulder like a parrot. I've been up there delivering feed, and he wasn't there, but his wife was, and she came around to the barn with that bird, and the bird was like, "Hey, there's a guy with a hat on and a beard," and he was like, she had him on her shoulder, and he was like going side to side until I stuck my finger over there and stuck him on my shoulder, and he just kind of sat there and watched me. So that's what you get when you handle your birds pretty regular.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Is that something you want to happen or not? You have to decide. You have to
that
figure
goes
that
back to
out.
what your goals are for your flock.
Yeah.
Frequent pen moving. I don't know why in the world anybody would want to move pens all the time, but that was one of the things that came up in the topic. And, don't do it.
Well, but I mean, okay, so like your aluminum coops, if you're moving them to new grass, they're happy. Okay.
Yeah, that's not a
So
bad thing.
if
And it's
you,
still the
whatever
same
you're
roof
doing,
bar, the same sidewalls, the same water, the same feeder, all of that.
whatever you do in your management style, you need to be consistent. Okay.
Yep.
So they can adapt to our idiosyncrasies. Um, but
Yeah.
if we are consistent, okay. So,
Right.
um, chickens like, if chickens get, once they get used to moving to a new territory, like especially if it's on grass, like your aluminum coops, they
Hmm.
love it. They'll be at the front of the cage waiting for you to move it, right? They know what's coming. But
Oh,
the
definitely.
first time you do it,
In the
yeah,
summertime when I do it, they know that if I'm opening the door to come in, but if they see me like lean all the way over to pick up the piece that engages the wheels, they will jump on the roost bars because they know what's coming.
yeah.
And it makes it a lot heavier, but
You can train a chicken.
hmm
That is true. You can train the chicken, but it takes consistency. So,
you can train a chicken easier than you can a toddler.
yeah, for sure. Doesn't
Hmm.
take nearly as long.
Mm-mm. Reproductive stress with your breeders.
Yeah,
Um,
you see it a lot. And we get it fixed in our mind that we want this hen with this rooster, right? And this is what we're gonna do, right? We're gonna force it. And you ever put a rooster in with a hen and she wants nothing to do with him? It's not. It wasn't her choice. Okay, so
hmm
um, you know they're not really into arranged marriages either.
Right,
Like they
right.
had back in the day. So you know, I actually, where it works, right, in a system where it can happen, I like it much better where the hen can go select her rooster, right? Especially if she's running around on the yard, she'll
Hmm.
figure out the best mate for her. Um, we don't always necessarily have, that ability to see, who's going to match up. Now, some hens it doesn't matter, some roosters it doesn't matter, but sometimes it does, right? So you just have to be prepared. She may not sit still for him, or he may not be interested in her. So,
So I got a chance a couple months ago to go visit with a mutual friend of ours and see his new breeding pen that he built.
mhm.
This thing's 100 feet long and either 12 or 14 feet wide. I don't remember for sure. And there was a wooden post, then a couple metal posts, a wooden post. That's the how it alternated all the way down the fence line. And there was a metal roof over, I want to say 30, 40 feet worth. And he said what he would do is on the wooden post, he had a place to hook a tie cord, and he would put the hens that he wanted to breed in there on one of those cords. And, there 2 or 3 males that he would want to breed to those, he would put one in there. And, some of the hens wouldn't have nothing to do with him, and some of them would. And he would watch, and he'd make note of which ones that it worked out with. And then he'd take that rooster out. Then he would get his other one. And he said it never failed. They would go to different hens. But he said he did it a lot of different ways, and he came up with that idea, and that's been the best. So my thought was to, if you got your king, your heir, and your spare rooster of a breed, you put them in there on a tie cord, and then you just put all your hens in there. And if they're all the same breed, you're going to get what you get. But if you trap the hen, you know which one laid it. I don't know. There's all kinds of ways to do it, but I think that a hen picking the rooster, you have a better chance for the magic to happen than trying to make it happen. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it's going to be a whole lot easier if the hen's making the selection.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think.
Let's see. Before we got Big White Fluffy Friend, my puppies, predatory stress was crazy there. He had birds that would not lay or breed and leave the coop just from the raccoon or weasel climbing the coop. And hey, I used to have a really bad problem with raccoons because apparently they like chicken as much as I do. And I was losing birds left and right. And since I put a fence up around my chicken yard and got Buddy and Lucy, I don't have any problems anymore.
So which
I
one's
did
better,
have.
Buddy or Lucy?
It depends on the situation. Lucy just turned a year. She is the Akbosh Pyrenees combo. She about 1/8 Akbosh, I believe, and she just turned a year old, so she's you know starting to get more mature. She's not trying to get in the pen with the chickens and mess with them. Buddy, he's a little over 2, and like he could be. Well, I've actually seen him laying on the ground and a chicken roosting on his side. He don't care.
They don't care.
Mm-mm. But you let something come near the yard that's not supposed to be, Buddy will go nuts. I
Buddy had a lot more experience in training. He had a lot more
yes,
time with his mom. So,
Buddy came from. He lived on a pastured poultry farm where they had tons of chickens and turkeys for a little over a year. So he was well seasoned, out of his puppy phase, trained, solid. And Lucy, which I mean, she first 3 4 months of her life, she grew up on a chicken farm, and then she came to mine. But puppies are going to be puppies. But now, I mean, the two of them will work in sync pretty well. Lucy makes more noise than Buddy does. So if I hear Lucy bark at night, I don't think nothing about it because that Pyrenees inside of her, they just don't shut up. If I hear Buddy bark at night, something's going on. Something's there that should not be. And he did do that for jungle fowl. It was game fowl that he had that he used that type. But I mean, to me, it makes sense for any. to let them select instead of you selecting. So I've paired birds up. I knew I had test hatched from her before, and I had test hatched him from before, and the two had traits that just perfectly complemented each other. So I put them by themselves for a couple weeks as a pair, and then I collected some eggs off of her, and none of them hatched. And I was like, and I even went out, look at bands, numbers, look in my book. And I've hatched off these before. What the crap? But I sat out there and watched them one day, and not a single time did either one of them even act like they wanted to get frisky. So I put him in another pen with some different hens, and literally within 30 seconds, he was going wild. So
Just wasn't interested in her anymore.
Like I don't know they ever had anything to do with each other. What about when people mix feed? Does mixing feed randomly create stress?
Again, our birds love consistency. They do like treats, don't get me wrong, but changing feeds is probably more of a stress than now if you're talking about mixing, randomly, like today putting in corn and tomorrow putting in milo and that sort of thing, it's going to be a little bit of a stress factor. They're used to coming up to the feeder and it looks the same.
Yeah.
Okay? So, and part of it depends on the bird's trust, your flock's trust level of you. Do they really like you or not? Like when you walk in the coop, are they surrounding your feet and they're looking for attention or not? So that, but and if they're not, then whenever you change the feed, they're going to look at you like, hey, what's this? Right. They got trust issues on occasion. Right. So
I get it.
Yeah. So, yeah, mix and feed maybe not be huge. Depends on the appearance of it, but they don't like a big change. My cousin called me one time, right, because he couldn't get the mash feed that he was getting. They had ran out, and they sold him a bag of pellets. And he brought the pellets home, put it in the feeder, and his hands looked at him like, "What is this crap? You expect me to eat this?" It was old, it was stale. They never saw that form of feed before. He called me, he was all worried. He goes, "What am I going to do?" I said, "Well," I said, "there ain't much you're going to do." I said, "You could probably throw a little cracked corn in it for a while just to tell them it's okay, but that's not going to
You need to hurry up and find the mash.
Yeah.
Or, something that smells really good. I had one of my customers, she ran out, and I didn't even know she was low. So couldn't do anything about that. But she said, "You made my chickens bougie." And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "It's your fault." I said, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "I ran out of feed." I said, "How is that my fault?" He said, "I don't know. I guess I'm the one that calculated it, but dang." I said, "Hey, look, I can't help you're a hatchaholic." And the numbers creeped up. They do that. And she said, "I had to go to the local store and get some feed. And I bought what I was feeding before I swapped to yours. But when I put it down in their trough, they looked at me like, 'What do you want me to do with this?' And literally, some of them walked away." I said, "Well, if your husband fed you steak all the time and he brought home a pack of hot dogs, you'd probably look at him kind of funny too." So
a lot of similarities there. So that's
Yeah.
for sure.
I thought it was hilarious. So, but anyway, let me go through and look and see if we got any questions because we're at our hour. Yeah, we got to that when I saw that you had starred. I think we got to them all. Yeah. So with that, we'll see y'all in 2 weeks.
All righty. Have a good night.